welcome back to Oh That Girl Reads, where we read what we love and DNF the rest. I'm your host, Bria, and today I figured that I would just sit down and talk to you guys about my reading story. Um, and I don't know, it seems a little silly to be like, this is my reading story, but one of my friends from high school, Alexis Rozzell, along with their co-author, Jack Benelli, wrote a really cute children's book called Zebo's Express, um, Adventures in Orb Station, and it is so cute. Like, she has been working super hard and promoting her book. I think that she has two books out at this point. She is an author and an illustrator, and I'm so proud of her. And what it reminded me of, because there's this video that she posted, it was these two boys and they were being handed her book, and it just, I don't know, it just reminded me of when I was that age and I was starting to read and how I got into it. So I figured that I would just have a mushy little episode talking about that. But first off, if you have a young reader in your life and you want to get them into reading, or you just want them to explore the thoughts around or just approach reading, get them into something, definitely check out Alexis Rozzell's Zebo Express. I feel like it's so cute. I love her art style too. But yeah, I come from a lawyer who was an English major and a journalism major. My dad did journalism. He interviewed all these cool people. Who was it? He interviewed Tyler Perry. He interviewed the creator of Rap Snacks, like way back in the day. My mom, she was an egghead literature student. She studied Latin. Like, I come from people who really, really enjoy literature. And then, you know, my grandmother was a reader, so I very much come from people who see literature as a work of art, and so there was always this heavy appreciation of it. My brother, he didn't really get into the whole reading vibe, but I remember the series that he would read. I can't remember it's like the Baron something. It was like a middle grade book. I remember what it looks like, but I remember he read those books constantly. He would read them over and over and over again. It was like his favorite series. I had my favorite series, and my little sister, when she started reading, had her own favorite series. And it was just very much a part of all of our lives growing up. And then when we moved out to Arizona, it's really hot here. It's funny because a group of my friends like messaged to the group chat, and they're like, "Oh, hey, like, we're going to go hike Camelback Mountain." I'm like, "What the frick?" And then everyone's like, "Oh, like, what time?" And they're like, 4 p.m. If you don't live in Arizona, know that that is the heat of the day. It's going to be about 110 degrees. Yeah, and they're trying to hike Camelback Mountain, which is one of the most challenging mountains in Arizona, as well as, this is so sad, but if you've seen that viral video of the lady who was spinning around in the helicopter after being like evac'd out of there, yeah, that was off of Camelback Mountain. I feel so bad for laughing at that video, but because she was terrified, she was really afraid for her life, and I felt really bad. But yeah, that's Camelback, and so it gets really hot here. 110 is a pretty average temperature in the month of July. And so obviously it always got super hot. So I remember as a kid, to beat the heat, my mom would take us to our local library, and we would do the summer reading programs there. We were able to rent DVDs. We had a Wii, and we were able to rent Wii games there. And I remember falling in love with this one book. It was a graphic novel. I think it was called The Adventures of Kiki Kitty. Let me see if I can actually find the author for you. Oh no, that's not what it was called. Oh my god. So it was called Fashion Kitty. Oh my gosh, that's so cute. Okay, so it was called Fashion Kitty. It was by Cherise Miracle Harper. And I would constantly check out this book. They only had like the first book that was ever made back at that time. And I would check it out constantly. I would renew it. It was like one of my favorite books. I even have a photo of me reading it while my sister's reading another book. Um, and as we got older, I started to like other books. Twilight was a really huge deal for me. As you can see, that right there, if you're watching the video version of this, it is a Twilight poster that says, Bella, where the hell have you been, Loca? And it's like Jacob in like booty shorts. I'll like show like a little photo of it here. Um, but I moved on, like, I read some other things in between there, like probably like I don't even remember the books that I read in between Fashion Kitty and Twilight. I feel like those are the two pivotal books in my life. That sounds so ridiculous, but they were. Oh wait, did I read? No, I read House of Night after I read Twilight, but um I read Twilight in the 6th grade, and you guys, I was relentlessly bullied in the 6th grade. Like, um, a group of girls literally just turned the whole entire class against me, and I felt so isolated. It was so horrible. And those girls were like my friends. Like, like what the fuck? I was like, and I'm still friends with one of them to this day, and like, whatever. It's cool. We're cool now, but like, it was a really hard time for me. So I was like super isolated. And just alone. And my mom gave me the whole Twilight box set for Christmas, and I devoured those books, and I got really into Twilight fan fiction. That was my world. That's how I started writing my own Twilight fan fiction. I will not tell you the name of it. I was about to. I will not tell you the name of it. But if you find it, you get a gold star. My name is not associated with any of it, so good luck finding that. But yeah, like I got really involved in like the Twilight community, and through loving Twilight, that's how I found Booktube. And oh my gosh, Booktube opened me up to so many different types of books, series. That's how I found House of Night on my own because I was always in Borders, and that was when Borders was still alive, before Barnes and Nobles bought it out. And I think I got the whole entire series, or no, most of the series of House of Night from Borders, and then Barnes and Nobles was the only thing available, and then I got the rest of that there. The House of Night series was so long, and it was so deranged. Like, every time I talk to every time I talk to Brooke about the House of Night series, she's like, I can't get over that part where she basically has sex with the bull. And I was like, I keep on fucking forgetting about how she has sex with a bull. Like dream sex almost. It was kind of weird. But there's also this creator who kind of does like a review of it. But I told myself I would never really read that series again because there's like one black female character, and they make her out to be this like spicy Jamaican, but like that's about it. Like, she doesn't even have like a Jamaican accent or anything. It's just that like her family is from Jamaica, and she's sassy, and she's like a twin. She's not like a twin, but there's this girl. What was her name? Shanice? It started with an S. I can't remember. And then there was Aaron, and they were like besties, and so they called each other twin, and they literally referred to each other as twin the whole entire time, and it was just kind of, I don't know. There's like 3 more books that happen after the very last book of the main series that I just couldn't really finish, but that's how I found House of Night. I've only ever been into Twilight fan fiction. Like, even to this day, like, I can't read fan fiction of another series. I can read Twilight fan fiction because like Twilight itself is such they say the characters are boring. I don't think so. I think Twilight is modern day gothic literature, and people will fight me on it, but I don't fucking care. I think that Twilight is modern day gothic literature. Whatever. Whatever. Fight me. I don't care. Crucify me. I don't care. I stand by what I said. Okay, and I'll prove it later if you need me to. But I think with Twilight in particular, it's not that it's boring, it's just that the characters are very like one layered. That they are actually really malleable as like a fan fiction writer. So that's why I kind of really was kind of good with just like reading different people's series or like books that were Twilight fan fiction. And actually a lot of a lot of books that are popular now were once Twilight fan fiction. Like I mean like books that are trending on Book Talk right now were once Twilight fan fiction, to the point that I went to a Barnes and Nobles and they didn't have a sign for it, but I knew it. They had a display that was literally romance novels that were all Twilight fan fiction. It was 50 Shades of Grey. It was a book by Maria Zapata, I think. I can't remember. I think it was Maria Zapata. She's the author of The Wall of Winnipeg. Um, and then there was I can't remember what the name of the book is now, but the book on fan fiction was called Edward Cullen Wallbanger, and there was like 5 other books. So it's to the point where like people know they are recognizing these books from fucking fan fiction, okay, and putting it on display. And it's so embarrassing that I know all of them. And I was like, oh my god, wait, I've read every single one of them. And having them all sit next to each other, I'm like, whoa, I was reading some really intense stuff as like a 13-year-old, but whatever. um but yeah, so that was kind of like where I like really started to like fixate, was like where I was, you know, super involved in the Booktube community. I remember finding Pulling Banana Books, Natasha Polis, Naya's Reads and Smiles or stuff like that. There was Jessie, there was like a bunch of like OG like booktubers, and they were all friends and they were all connected. It was almost like the OG booktubers were my beauty gurus, even though I also looked at beauty gurus, but they were my beauty gurus and I wanted to be like them so bad. I remember trying to do my own like booktube channel and I just didn't really have the gear for it, and it was so, I don't know, I remember being so disheartened, like not being able to film a video or it not looking good. Like my room was green and I didn't like how I looked on camera. I didn't like how I sounded. I didn't like how far away my camera was. I was so insecure about filming book content. And like now I have a podcast talking about books, and it's kind of crazy to think about that whole journey and like about how much this love of literature has just followed me throughout my life. But yeah, I always knew like that I very much cared about reading and writing, and I'm lucky to say that I've had really amazing teachers along the way who kind of fed this joy in me. Um, and I don't know, I think it's such an interesting journey, but I was really into that community and that really sparked a lot of things. I saw like how you could get sent books, and that was really exciting. I saw how you could go to different events and conventions. Now like for me, it feels a little bit more monetized these days, especially with like TikTok and how many people are on the platform now. Not to say that in like a scarcity mindset type of way. Like to be honest, like my goal with my podcast isn't necessarily to make money off of it. This is just my love and my joy and a place that I can just be myself, my true nerd self. But I think with the advancement of like the book community, which is super beautiful, by the way, don't get me wrong, it's amazingly beautiful how people who've said they haven't read in a long time or have never been into reading are discovering books that they absolutely love and adore. It makes me super excited. But I do think it did really change I think it changed the floor of what the book community looked like. To be honest, I'm more so a fan of the book community a few years ago, like when I was in college, because it was woke enough that it there was really good discourse starting about like the publishing industry, about how the publishing industry are utilizing book influencers and readers in order to promote their book. Um, but it wasn't on a platform that didn't allow that, or it wasn't on a platform. Wait, hold on. Let me reword this. But it wasn't on a platform that restricted in how people interacted with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's easier to have discourse when you see a YouTube video and you have the YouTube comments where you don't really have a cap on what you can say. It's harder to have discourse, and it's harder to have discourse starting on like a platform like TikTok because you're so shoved into a small character amount and everything is disjointed. Does that make sense? And so like most of the time when you hear about like a thought or some controversy, you're hearing it second or third hand. You rarely ever hear it from the source unless you follow someone who heard it from the source. So it's like really disconnected. Like it's a very interesting thing. And yeah, I feel like the reading community now is a lot different than when I grew up, but at the same time, it's such a good community to be in, and it's offered so much to a lot of people, especially through like the TikTok platform. Um, One thing that it did also teach me is that women really do drive sales. Book Talk is predominantly women from my experience. Um, and women who are very protective over their womanly space. So that's also really interesting as well. Um, but yeah, so I got really into it in middle school. My mom bought me this tiny laptop, 8th grade graduation. And I would write my fan fiction on this tiny laptop. Oh my God. It was like an 8-inch laptop. It was like smaller than an iPad, I swear to you. And I would literally just like type my fan fiction and post it, and I would reply to comments, and I actually got comments and stuff like on this story. And but that fueled me in a different way. And so when I got into high school, I learned about like the journalism club. I took all honors English until junior year, and then I took dual enrollment classes. So it it was just so funny that I was like actually typing on the tiniest freaking laptop ever. But anyway, so I have to start off with like my freshman year in high school, and I had honors English with Miss Moya. Shout out to you, Miss Moya. Love you so much. I can't even describe the type of influence she's had on me because I feel like she's changed. She really like fueled my energy when it came to um, analyzing text and things like that. But also, and I think this is like such a value to teachers, she also made me feel important and made me feel like my thoughts were important. Um, and I think that's kind of like why I love literature so much, is because like it constantly proves to me that I have something interesting to say. And so that was reflected back to me by Miss Moya, my first year as a freshman in college or in high school. And so I have this memory. I can't really replace the time place the timeline quite well, so forgive me. But we had summer reading, and that's when we had to do annotations. And that's when I learned what annotations are, and it looks psychotic. I remember my uncle my uncle saw my annotations for the first time because I was keeping track of the answers to certain things. So I read through all of the questions and I would reference it back and forth. And I would keep track of all the answers to the questions, and then I did my writing afterwards because it was easier for me to read through the book and highlight where the questions were than to read all the way through and then go back and answer the questions. Like, that's just not how I work. And so that's how I did it. I had all my flags, and so the book started off like a regular book, and then it got super fat by the end of it. And my uncle, he was like, "That looks deranged. Like that is psychotic. I've never seen a book look like that before." He's like, "Why is it so big?" And he like totally made fun of me for it. But I that was the first time I ever annotated anything, and I got my summer reading project back. I think that book was, what was that one book by Harper Lee? What the fuck was it called? I can't remember what it was called, but that was what we had for summer reading for honors English. And then we had to do an essay, and I talked about how I did a singing competition that my mom randomly signed me up for. And Miss Moya just showed so much interest in me, and she's like, "Oh, like, I really like this essay, and I like really liked how you talked about everything." And she's like, "But you didn't tell me if you won." I was like, "Oh, I didn't. I didn't win at all." But I felt like that moment like made me feel really special and made me feel really seen, and like she actually cared about like what I was doing. Like she just kind of cared about me as a person, and that felt really nice. And I felt like that was kind of continuous throughout the year, that she really cared about me and about my work, and it felt like she took pride in me, and that helped me take pride in my work. And I felt like she was always introducing us to such interesting concepts. I remember we read Wuthering Heights, and that's where we were kind of introduced to the, what was it, Kate Bush's like Wuthering Heights song or whatever. I don't know. I remember like her class so distinctly, and it was just such a good time. But I think that's kind of where I really started to establish my interest. And I always knew that I was going to be a English literature major, but I think when I went into my freshman year of high school, it was solidified then. Like I was like, I am definitely going to be an English major. Nobody can tell me anything different. And I did go on to be an English literature major. So it's actually kind of funny because like my camera died in the middle of me filming this. And so I took a break to just like take a nap or whatever, because like honestly my brain cells are like slowly fading away. But I went ahead and I looked up a kind of just like a review of the House of Night series. And y'all, I forgot how low key homophobic that book was. In the effort of PC and Kristen Cass trying to not be homophobic, they came off even worse than if they just called, the gay characters that they had like the F word, to be honest. And it's so funny like listening to like reading the comments and listening to the person review it. I forgot their name, so I'll link the review down below in the show notes if you want to check it out. But it's so interesting. It's like 2 hours long, and it's like for the third book I think in the series. But if you just feel like doing a little throwback to a series that you used to love, definitely check that out. But yeah, so after that, like my sophomore year of high school was really challenging for me in terms of like English literature. It was still a class that I was super confident in my work, prideful of my work in. But I don't know, like the teacher that I had that year was just really hard to please, which prepared me to encounter those same sorts of professors in college. So I'm not I don't really regret it. I still had a good time, and I felt like, even that teacher, though they were very hard on me for my sophomore year, I think that's like where I built a real critical eye. And then my junior year was when I had my other favorite um, English literature teacher, Miss Borchers. Literally, I can't describe it, but I feel like Miss Borchers set me free in terms of my enjoyment of literature. Like something about it is I feel like this sounds weird, but I have this like distinct memory of like when she played a Seinfeld episode in our class one day. And I don't remember I think it had to deal with like humor or types of humor or something like that. I can't remember why we were watching it exactly, but me and her were like the only two people in this whole entire classroom that was like cracking up. Like I was crying and there was like tears rolling down my face. And my friend who was sitting next to me, she's like, "Do you really think this is funny?" I was like, "No, this is the funniest shit I've I was like legitimately laughing, but like I mean, I also kind of grew up watching Seinfeld with my parents too, so that kind of I don't know. I just never seen that particular I mean, I've probably seen that episode, but when you're older, you understand jokes a little bit better. I can't remember what scene it was that she played, but we were dying and no one else was laughing. But I think that was kind of like the moment that showed me like to not really care about how other people are responding to the media that you're enjoying. Um, but then she also presented us like um, these like really cool units as well. I remember The Great Gatsby was like her favorite unit. It was like her favorite thing to just talk about. And it's funny because the other day my mom was like, "Bria, like you should really be an English teacher." And I'm like, you know what? Honestly, if I was, we would have a whole unit on vampires and I would make them read vampire literature. And I think it would be like the equivalent. So like Mrs. Borcher's like or Miss Borcher's like love of The Great Gatsby is the equivalent to my love of vampires and like the Twilight series. So it would be the same exact thing. I'd just be like, guys, this is amazing. But yeah, like I really felt like I came out of my shell in that class too because we had to do Socratic seminars, and I think that really helped me in terms of like being able to um listen and digest information and think critically about things, but it also made me really bold. Like, I loved Socratic seminars. I would go in there ready to fight people. I was ready to demolish people. Like, I was excited about this stuff. So, it was really fun, and like I hated when cuz high school it happens. I hated when I couldn't read what I needed to read or do the assignment that I needed to do in order to like fully participate in a Socratic seminar because like I don't know, I had like little enemies in class. Like I mean, we were cool. Like we didn't actually have actual beef, but there were some people that I just felt like I wanted to destroy low key. And so it made me sad when I didn't have the opportunities to actually destroy them academically in the way that I wanted to. So I really enjoyed those two classes. I can't remember who I had for senior year. Who did I have for senior year? Am I remembering my timeline correctly? I know no, I'm like 100% sure that I had yeah, I did have to have Miss Borchers for junior year because my friend Day asked me to prom my junior year. So I had to remember the timeline. Okay, so yeah. Who did I have for senior year? I don't remember her name. I remember her face, but I don't remember her name. But I remember actually reading Macbeth and liking it. I'm not really like a Shakespeare person. Macbeth's by Shakespeare, right? Am I remembering that correctly? I feel kind of dumb right now. Hold on. Macbeth. Yeah, okay, it is. I'm not like a Shakespeare girly. I'm not. Mm-mm. I actually didn't like Romeo and Juliet until my senior year in college. Until my senior year in college, I did not like Romeo and Juliet. I read Romeo and Juliet with a professor, Dr. Fazio. She was the short Italian lady, and I did her Shakespeare class. She made all of his shit seem so interesting because I hate that man. Oh my god. Oh my god, it was such a drag. I hate him so much. Oh god, it was just awful. But she actually made me like Romeo and Juliet. It was just so it was such a good time. And I feel like she also picked out like other plays and sonnets and all of his other bullshit that were actually like pretty entertaining. Um, and she also played, what was that one movie with Lawrence Fishburne in it? What did he do? Oh, okay. So he did Othello. Yeah, we watched that version of Othello in her class. That was good. In Miss Moya's class for Romeo and Juliet, we watched the 1997 version of it with Leonardo DiCaprio, and that shit was awesome. Oh my god, that was actually so good. That was actually a really good one. Um, but I've never been like a Shakespeare girly, but I think that's the only thing I really remember from my senior year of high school. Yeah, I think that's it. That's all I remember from my senior year of high school. It wasn't that important, but I think, you know, it's crazy like how in particular like my high school English teachers built such a foundation for me going into college and kind of figuring out what I wanted to study. But at the same time, it was like the booktube community that was really opening my eyes to different concepts. I was really into feminism, in activism. Around that time, the Black Lives Matter movement was really kicking up. The development of own voices in the publishing industry was starting to be developed, that hashtag. And so when I went into my degree for English literature, I really wanted to have a discipline in social justice. So I was taking a lot of classes by Native American women, Black women. Um, I did a class in Chicano literature. Um, I did a lot of, I did a few anthropology classes that talked about women in the East, and it really introduced me to this concept of cultural relativism. That was really important and really formative to me as a reader personally because, you know, it's so interesting when like someone analyzes a text, right? Like you come from your perspective, which is beautiful, which is great, and the writer comes from their own perspective. And so I think when it comes to being a writer and a reader, there's this almost like little dance that goes on where you kind of meet in the middle with your experiences, but I think as a reader too, you definitely have to meet the writer where they are because their standards of like feminism, depending on like their culture, their background, their ideology, might be way different and way off than yours. And then you have to like really think about the time period and the the social climate in which something is written, which is really interesting. And that's why I'm having such a good time with the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires and doing research on vampirism because vampirism has like such a long history in the literature world. And so it's gone through different movements throughout different decades. And even then, the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires is set in the 1980s. So like the war on drugs, feminism, racism all looks different back then than it does now. And then so like when I'm reading this text, I'm looking at it through a Gen Z borderline millennial who was born in 1997, who is a Black woman who's lived through different other social movements that progressed us forward in this lens. So it's so interesting, and I feel like that's like really impacted me as not only a reader but as like an academic and as a person, and it allows me to like connect with people in a certain way. And I think that's kind of what excites me about like TikTok now, even though I personally had to take a break. Like I felt it was getting a little overwhelming at times, and I felt like, you know, there can kind of be this dogpiling thing and a level of how can I actually word this in a way that conveys what I mean? A level of elitism when it comes to certain things. And I think that also comes with okay, and I think that also comes with me being a library girly. I worked in a library for 3 years, separately across the timeline. I was library page, or 2 years. 2 years, I'm sorry. I was a library page, and then I was a library circ attendant. Um, and so talking about access and things like that is really important to me. So I think sometimes when we have certain discussions on book talk, and people are throwing out certain types of insults, I think they don't really think about how that actually impacts other people, and like, it's kind of crazy. So I personally had to take a break from TikTok, but that's not to say that TikTok hasn't done some powerful stuff in the book community in raising more readership. For example, there is a man on TikTok. He really struggled. I will put his information in. I believe his name is Oliver. I'm sorry that I didn't actually. Let me actually look it up. Yes. Okay. So his name is Oliver James. He is 34 years old and he's learning to read. He's found that like his story is really interesting. So if you want to look him up, I'll like link him down below. But he didn't feel safe in school. He didn't feel safe in school at all, and so that really affected his performance in school, and he wasn't able to learn how to read. And so now he's 34 years old and he is on TikTok documenting his journey on how he's learning to read. And it's such an amazing thing because he almost created his own book club, and he like talks about the books that he's reading, and people are suggesting books that they love, and it became like such a positive and sweet space. And it warmed my heart, and it reminded me of how much I love literature, and that it connects people in that manner. And so I don't know, I'm really excited about book talk as a place. I do think that sometimes, a lot of people get wrapped up in the in I think people I think what a lot of the conversations on book talk that kind of gets pushed forward is weirdly enough a symptom of capitalism. And not necessarily like, it's interesting, like it's definitely a symptom of capitalism, and I wish I had the brain width to explain to you why I think that way, in a full roundabout way. But I've noticed that once money gets involved, um the algorithm, because the algorithm is racist, how else can I say it, it does lift up, you know white creators more than it lifts up BIPOC creators, and as a result, it skews what's popular in the book industry. Um, as you can tell by the sheer amount of Colleen Hoover books that have been all over the place. Not saying that Colleen Hoover's bad or that you're a bad person if you engage with her writing. You're not. That's never what I want to say, and never what I want to convey. Um, but that's just like an example of like how something got popularized, how Sarah J Maas, for example, has gotten popularized, things like that. um I think because of that, and because then you're no longer a reader, you're an influencer, like you're a book influencer. um it changes the dynamics because now money's involved. It changes how we speak about these things, even if people don't think that it does. So that's all I'm going to say on that. But yeah, I think, with literature and things like that, it's given me so much, and so I get so excited when people are talking about books. Like, I have this one friend, and on Facebook, and she's been posting recently about like what she's been reading, and every time I see a post, I just smile a little bit. She just like she just says like, oh, like I'm reading this book and I just want to lay down, I want to go home and read. And like I'm like, oh my god, I feel that so bad. Like I feel it so bad, and I know that like headspace where you're like reading a really good book and you're like, all I want to do right now is be home. Like I don't even want to be out and about with y'all. I just want to be home reading my book. And it just makes me so happy that it's becoming a positive place for people. And it makes me happy that, like, because like there are adults who love reading, adults can share that love of reading with their children, and that gets passed on. um I do, in a way, want to expand a little bit, because I feel like for the most part I do talk about like romance, and I feel like all I've talked about is like romance, fantasy, and horror since I've started. But I really do want to challenge myself with Oh That Girl Reads too, to kind of bring in like that English literature nerd side of me, but also that like librarian side of me, where I want to be like a sort of a resource to kind of help encourage people and to talk about things that are like a little bit more important to me as a reader. I don't want to get stuck in the categories of like shouting into a void almost. Yeah, I think sometimes, like, when I think about the conversations that get brought up um on the platforms that start discourse, so like book talk, and a lot of the book talk discourse makes it to YouTube. And I feel like YouTube is an appropriate platform to have that sort of discourse, because you can have that back and forth. um but I think I don't want to contribute to uh the noise, in the sense that like I want to be about it, not talk about it in a sense. I don't know. I really want to do something great with this, and talking about like my journey with reading and how important it is to me, and then remembering like how amazing and kind my teachers were to me. I don't know, it just gave me so much energy just now and filled me with so much warmth. Like, I've gotten to a place now where I'm like reading arcs and giving feedback, and I did this one review for, I can't remember. I think it was for The Happy Couple, and I did it for NetGalley. And I have never felt so proud of myself before. And I feel like it's been such a self esteem builder to practice this part of my brain again. And I feel really grateful right now for just like everyone who's been supporting me on this journey of Oh That Girl Reads, and everyone who's supported me on my journey of just being someone who loves literature. I mean, it means the entire world to me that you saw something in me at whatever stage you met me in. I just appreciate you. Um, but yeah, reading has been such a huge part of my life and such a passion of mine. And it's funny because I think I got to a point where it started to feel like work, because I felt like I had to kind of keep up with this like social aspect of reading, when in reality all I had to do was just, you know, oh dear God. Okay, I got really nervous for a second. But in reality, all I had to do was just remain true to myself and like what I actually am inspired to do. And I don't know, it was a really good week. Like, I've started to do all my research for the Southern Book Club's Guide, and I found like this dissertation that's really, really good. It's a pretty good dissertation, and it really brings up topics about vampirism and uh, the Victorian era's wave of the new woman. I believe that's how it was phrased. And it got me thinking, like, it got my brains turning. And I went downstairs and I was talking to my mom and my dad, and I was like, yeah, and this and this and this, and like in relation to this book, like it means this. And it's kind of interesting, like how, certain concepts of like being a vampire changes once it's a woman who's writing, you know, like about vampires, or a woman writing in horror. And I'm really interested in comparing and contrasting like traditional horror tropes and how a woman would approach horror. And like one thing, like one thing that like I really am interested in, because there was actually a thread that I found that was talking about if sexual assault or rape should be included in horror. And I have thoughts on that, especially about how rape and sexual assault is written differently between men and women, or more so differently between those who've experienced rape and who haven't experienced rape or sexual assault, how it's like different between the two. Not saying that men don't experience it. That's why I reworded it in the way of like those who have and those who haven't. Because I feel like in some terms, like in some horror, for example, rape and sexual assault is used as like a shock factor, um, versus being used as like an actual horror element. If that makes sense, I'll have to develop those thoughts, but I promise you, I have them. And I promise you will hear about them soon enough. But yeah, I think it's just like small things like that excitement to talk about like these thoughts that I have, and talk about like the different ways in which certain literary elements are showing up, and how different like themes and just tropes and things like that are showing up. It excites me so much, and I forgot how much it does excite me. I love reading for pleasure. I truly do. But it was funny because like my sister and my mom were making fun of me because I annotate everything. Like, one thing, so I was nervous about getting a Kindle because I couldn't annotate. I definitely use the highlight and notes feature. I do. I still annotate on my Kindle. And it's hard for me not to do it. It sometimes like I'll have a book where I'm just kind of like, I don't know, I'm here for the vibes. I don't really care if I annotate this or not, but most of the time I'm prepared with my highlighters and my pencil and my sticky notes and my tabs to annotate a book. I don't go into a book without thinking about it critically in some way. And it was interesting because recently there was a woman on TikTok being like, I don't understand women who annotate books that are just like romance, like Akatar and like Sarah J. Maas and like Fae romance and just like smut. Like, I don't get it. Like, what are you even writing in there? Like, I'm not trying to be a hater and stuff like that. And I'm like, bitch, you're so dumb. You're so dumb. Because you know what annotation is? Annotation, and this is what I've learned from my beautiful teachers, annotation is a tool to understanding. It's a tool of analysis. You can analyze anything. And I hate when people give romance like shit for just being romance, because one, it feels like internalized misogyny to spit on something that majority women engage with and discounting it as not real literature. That's internalized misogyny, one. But two, like pornography, romance is a social and political reflection of your world. Like, I promise you, like, this is going to sound crazy. You can literally see the beliefs of men and women, political beliefs. You could see religious beliefs. You can see a bunch of history in the lens of romance. Just how you can do so in porn. Fun fact. Okay, fun porn fact. It's not actually fun. It's actually devastating. But one of the highest trending porn categories during Trump's presidency was police porn with a white female cop and a black male, as well as ICE, border patrol porn. Yeah. So, if you want an interesting insight on the porn industry and actually get and I know I bring up the point. It feels really random to this episode, but I think, you know, being exposed to certain things does kind of help you get some background knowledge on, you know, not only me as like what I think about in terms of like the feminist lens and things like that in media, um, which my interest in media was also inspired by my English literature path. Um, but if you ever want to learn more about that, it'll also give you an insight about, surprisingly, it will give you an insight on romance as well, like how those two connect. Even though porn is a male dominated industry and romance literature is more so female dominated at this point in time, it'll give you insight on how certain pieces of media respond to your society, your current day society. So this podcast that I really like is called Girls on Porn. Um, I think it's available everywhere. I haven't listened to it in a long time. I was listening to it on Apple Podcasts, but I imagine they have it on Spotify as well. That is a great podcast if you want to do some real thinking about not only media, but um, gender and sexuality identity, as well as racism and feminism. There's a lot of interesting topics explored through that podcast, and it's featuring people who work in the porn industry. So that's a good podcast. But anyway, I am running the clock right now. I have so many thoughts, but that's just who I am in a nutshell. That's my reading journey. That's how I got started. That's my passion. And again, I really appreciate everyone who has joined me on this journey. If you would love to hear more from me, you can follow me over on Oh That Girl Reads on both Instagram and TikTok. Um, yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts about this episode. Thank you again for being here, and I hope you take care. Bye. So long, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. If you would like to see more, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok, Oh That Girl Reads. If you want more bookish content, feel free to check out my Booktube channel, Bria L, on YouTube. Remember, read what you love and DNF the rest. Bye.